never thought I'd see the day my daughter got slapped across the face in the middle of lunch, and by the son of the most powerful man in our neighborhood. 30 seconds
Nice
later,
swing.
that boy was
Cameras
crying on
love
the floor,
angles.
and by sundown, his parents were next. Lunch was loud that day, the kind of ordinary school chaos that fills a cafeteria with the sound of trays clattering, laughter echoing off tiled walls, and 100 conversations colliding into noise. Then, out of nowhere, that noise collapsed into silence. A single, sharp sound cut through the room. A slap. It echoed, one clean crack across the air that made even the soda machine hum feel awkwardly loud. My daughter, Tiffany, stood frozen beside her table, her cheek turning red. In front of her was Chad Abernathy, the local prince of Oak Meadows, son of the HOA president, and the kind of boy who thought rules applied to everyone but him. He still had his hand half raised, like even he couldn't believe he'd done it. For a few long seconds, nobody moved. Then the whispers began. Phones came out. Cameras rolled. And just like that, every kid in that cafeteria became a witness. Tiffany didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. She turned back slowly, eyes cold, calm, terrifyingly calm. Her voice came out steady, almost polite. "Nice swing," she said. "Cameras love angles." That was my daughter, 16, sarcastic, unflinching. She got her mouth from me, her patience from her mother, and her composure from some mysterious divine source that I still can't explain. 30 seconds later, Chad was the one crying on the floor. But before I tell you how that happened, I need to tell you how we even got here. How a move to a perfect neighborhood turned into the start of a suburban war. 3 months earlier, I was just another dad trying to keep his family comfortable. I'd taken a promotion that came with long hours and a big mortgage, and Dana, my wife, found us a house in a place called Oak Meadows, a neighborhood so clean it felt like someone power washed the air. White fences, fresh lawns, perfect mailboxes. People waved, but the smiles never reached their eyes. Everyone seemed just a little too nice, like they were performing neighborliness instead of living it. I should have known that much perfection hides something ugly underneath. Dana loved it, though. She's the planner, lists, spreadsheets, color-coded binders. "It's stable," she said. "Good schools, safe streets." She wasn't wrong. The schools were great. The streets were quiet. The neighbors were polite. And the HOA? Well, the HOA ran everything. At the time, I didn't even know what an HOA really did. I thought it was just about trash pickup and pool access. I didn't realize it was a miniature government run by people who'd weaponized the color beige. Tiffany wasn't thrilled about moving. 16, sarcastic, new school, you can imagine. She rolled her eyes at every, "You'll make friends fast," pep talk we gave her. But she went along with it. Because that's who she is, she doesn't whine, she adapts. Her first week at the new school seemed fine. Quiet. Normal. Until that lunchroom scene. The call came at 12:43 p.m. The school's number popped up on my phone. You never want to see that number during the day. "Mr. Bowman," the voice said, too calm. "There's been an incident involving your daughter." My heart dropped into my shoes. "Is she hurt?" "She's fine. Physically fine," the voice added quickly, which only made me more afraid. By the time I pulled into the school parking lot, my hands were shaking on the wheel. My wife Dana was already there. She beats me to calm by about 3 miles every time. We walked into the office, and there she was, Tiffany, sitting in a chair, arms crossed, cheek red but dry-eyed, expression somewhere
Nice
between
swing.
bored and furious.
Cameras love angles.
"Dad?" she said, before I could even ask. "It's fine. Fine." I looked at her. "Someone hit you." "Yeah," she said, "and now he's crying in the nurse's office." I blinked. "Wait, what?" She shrugged, like it wasn't a big deal. "He swung." I ducked. "He tripped." Something about a tray, gravity, and karma. Dana was already taking notes in that little black notebook she keeps in her purse. She uses it for everything from grocery lists to apocalypse scenarios. The vice principal came in, trying too hard to sound neutral. "We're treating this as a peer-to-peer conflict." Dana didn't look up. "A conflict?" He struck her. "Yes, but it's important to consider context." "The context," I interrupted, "is that your student assaulted my daughter." He stammered something about suspension and procedure. I could feel my blood pressure trying to break out of my skin. Dana touched my arm gently. "Not here," she whispered. "We'll handle this our way." I knew that tone. It's the same one she uses when she's about to rearrange reality with bullet points and evidence. That night at dinner, Tiffany told the full story. It started with Chad picking on a smaller kid, the kind of old-school lunch money cliché you think only happens in movies. Tiffany called him out with one line, a sarcastic jab that made the cafeteria laugh. Chad didn't like being laughed at. He stormed over, puffed up his chest, and when she didn't flinch, he slapped her. And she just stared at him. Cold. Silent. Like she'd already decided how the next chapter would go. As I sat there listening, watching my daughter eat spaghetti like nothing happened, I realized something. This wasn't just a school bully. This was a symptom of something bigger, entitlement that started at home. And if Chad's father, the HOA president, was anything like his son, then this slap was only the opening shot. They thought it would end there, in a cafeteria full of kids and cameras. But they had no idea who they'd just picked a fight with. If you'd met us before Oak Meadows, you'd probably say we were normal. Not picture perfect, not falling apart. Just a family that laughed loud, fought small, and always found our way back to each other. I'm Jim Bowman, 43, the kind of dad who fixes things for a living. Everything except, apparently, peace and quiet. I run a small construction business that keeps roofs from leaking and foundations from cracking. I'm not a fighter by nature, but I'll protect what's mine until the last brick falls. My wife, Dana, is the opposite of me in all the ways that matter. Where I charge, she calculates. Where I talk loud, she listens quiet. She's got this calm that could freeze fire. You'd think she was a librarian in another life, except her weapon isn't books, it's spreadsheets. Dana is the kind of person who keeps a tiny notebook in her purse and writes down everything. Grocery lists, meeting notes, even the time a neighbor waved too long. She calls it data. I call it evidence. Then there's Tiffany, our daughter, 16 going on 40. Sharp as glass, funny as hell, and sometimes too brave for her own good. She's got Dana's brain and my sarcasm, which means she can dismantle an argument faster than most adults can blink. She doesn't raise her voice. She sharpens it. When she was 8, she talked her teacher out of giving weekend homework by pointing out a loophole in the class syllabus. When she was 12, she caught a scammer trying to charge my credit card twice and got the refund herself. Tiffany doesn't need saving. She needs an audience. And finally, there's Grant, my quiet one, 14, broad-shouldered from wrestling, gentle to the core. He's the kid who fixes broken remotes, helps old ladies with groceries, and never says much. But when he does talk, you listen. He's all patience, all control. I've seen him face opponents twice his size and wait for the perfect second to strike. It's not that he doesn't get angry. He just channels it better than I ever learned to. Together, we're the Bowmans. Loud dinners, inside jokes, a front porch that never stays clean. We've moved a few times before. Job changes, better schools, safer streets. But Oak Meadows felt different from the start. Dana called it a fresh start. Tiffany called it step forward with Wi-Fi. I should have listened to Tiffany. The first week we moved in, everything looked too perfect. The lawns were lined up like military recruits. The mailboxes gleamed. Even the trash cans looked staged for a photo shoot. Our neighbor across the street, Todd, waved at us like he was practicing for a parade. The kind of wave that says, welcome, but also, don't you dare plant the wrong flowers. That night, we got our first HOA welcome packet, 32 pages of rules. Rules about fence height, grass color, even the approved fonts for house numbers. I laughed at first. Dana didn't. She was already highlighting sections. I like order, she said. Order, I said. This is a dictatorship with lawn care. She smirked. Then don't get fined, General. For the first few weeks, life was normal. The kids adjusted to school. Dana made friends with a few moms on the community Facebook page. I fixed the loose railing on the porch. But something about Oak Meadows never sat right. It wasn't just the rules, it was the people enforcing them. At the center of it all was Richard Abernathy, HOA president, a man who walked around like the mayor of a very beige kingdom. He had that look of someone who believed control was the same thing as leadership. And then there was his wife, Karen, the unofficial queen of complaints. She ran the community page like a gossip tabloid wrapped in the language of concern. Their son, Chad, was a carbon copy, loud, entitled, born with a smirk. He thought intimidation was a charm. He was the kind of boy who never heard no without hearing it as a challenge. The Abernathy's weren't just neighbors, they were an ecosystem. Everyone orbited around them, too scared or too polite to break away. The first time I saw Richard, he was measuring a neighbor's mailbox with a ruler. No joke, tape measure in hand, clipboard tucked under his arm, muttering about non-compliance. When he saw me watching, he smiled. "Got to keep standards high, Mr. Bowman," he said. "Sure," I replied. "Wouldn't want a crooked mailbox to bring down property values." He didn't get the sarcasm. Tiffany noticed Chad the same week. He was in 2 of her classes, the kind of kid who talks loud, cheats off homework, and thinks girls laugh because he's funny, not because they're trying not to cry. "Let me guess," I said when she mentioned him. "Popular, rich, thinks deodorant is optional." "Exactly," she said. "And he calls himself the Prince of Oak Meadows." "Prince?" I laughed. "Then what does that make his dad?" "The Emperor of Beige," she said. That's when I knew. She'd already figured him out. Looking back, the warning signs were everywhere. The Abernathists didn't just run the HOA, they were the HOA. Rules bent when they wanted them to. Fines disappeared for their friends. And people whispered about families who had moved out suddenly after too many violations. It was controlled, wrapped in banners and newsletters. We thought we could stay invisible. Just keep our heads down, follow the rules, stay out of trouble. But then came that slap, that single moment in a cafeteria that pulled the mask off everything. Because in that room, Chad Abernathy didn't just hit my daughter. He exposed his family's entire empire of arrogance. And that, as Dana would later say while she flipped open her notebook, was their first mistake. If Oak Meadows had a royal family, it was the Abernathists. Not because anyone liked them, but because everyone was afraid of them. Richard Abernathy, the HOA president, treated the neighborhood like his personal kingdom. He wasn't elected. He was installed, like an expensive but unnecessary chandelier nobody dared to replace. He had this way of talking that made every sentence sound like a warning, a smile that never reached his eyes. He wore polos in winter and drove a golf cart instead of walking. The kind of man who measured respect by how many people pretended to laugh at his jokes. And then there was Karen Abernathy, his wife, the self-appointed moral compass of Oak Meadows. She ran the HOA Facebook group like a digital dictatorship. Her posts always started the same way, as a concerned neighbor. But what followed was never a concern. It was surveillance. She knew everything. Who left their trash cans out too long, who painted their porch the wrong shade of white, who let their dog bark past 8 p.m. Her keyboard was a weapon, and her favorite target was anyone new. And then, of course, came Chad, their son, the prince. 17 going on spoiled. The kind of kid whose dad calls the school when he gets a B and whose mom blames teachers for not recognizing his leadership potential. He cruised through school on last names and fake charm. Loud laugh, expensive sneakers, backup singers disguised as friends. He was untouchable, or at least, he thought he was. From the outside, the Abernathists looked like the model family. Perfect yard, clean driveway, 2 luxury SUVs, matching mailboxes. But underneath, there was rot. The kind of rot that doesn't smell until it's too late. You could see it in how they talked to people, polite in public, cruel in private. If Richard caught a neighbor's hedge too tall, he'd fine them. But if his own grass turned brown, the water system was to blame. If Karen didn't like her family, suddenly there were anonymous complaints about unapproved modifications or noise violations. It was controlled masquerading as a community. And the worst part? The neighbors played along. Not because they agreed, but because fighting the Abernathists meant social suicide. They had power, and everyone knew it. The first time I really met Richard, he was inspecting my driveway. Clipboard, camera, ruler, like a one-man SWAT team for concrete. He said, "Your edge line is 2 inches over the property marker." I said, "I guess the earth shifted." He didn't laugh. He wrote something down and said, "We'll let it slide this time. We'll let it slide." That was his phrase, his way of saying, "I own you now." Karen followed up the next day with a welcome to the neighborhood email that somehow included a list of everything she expected us to improve: the mailbox font, the garden edging, the color of our shutters. Dana printed it, highlighted it, and said, "We'll comply." I said, "No, we'll coexist." She smirked. "Not with these people." It didn't take long for Tiffany to cross paths with Chad. Same school, same social circle, or at least he thought so. She told me later that he introduced himself by saying, "You probably already know who I am." She replied, "No, but that sounds like a medical condition. That was Tiffany, subtle as a sledgehammer. Chad didn't take rejection well. He wasn't used to it. He started
Nice
small,
swing.
teasing,
Cameras love
mocking,
angles.
little power plays. But Tiffany didn't play the game. Every time he pushed, she deflected with humor that cut deeper than an insult. And that's what drove him crazy. She wasn't afraid of him. At school, he was a loud shadow of his father. At home, he was the prince of privilege. He never faced consequences because his parents cleaned up every mess before it could stain. By the time the cafeteria incident happened, everyone already knew who the Abernathists were, bullies with HOA badges. They hid behind policies, behind procedure, behind community standards. But they'd never met a family like mine before. They didn't know my wife was a human filing cabinet with the patience of a saint and the instincts of a prosecutor. They didn't know my son could break you down without throwing a punch. They didn't know my daughter could make you wish you'd never opened your mouth. The Abernathists ruled Oak Meadows by fear and manipulation. They just made the mistake of thinking fear worked on everyone. If you ever want to know what kind of person your kid really is, watch how they handle a moment of public humiliation. That cafeteria, that moment, told me everything I needed to know about my daughter. It started like any other Tuesday. Pizza day. The smell of reheated dough and overworked cheese filled the room. The air buzzed with teenage chatter, the scrape of chairs, the endless rhythm of soda cans popping open. Tiffany sat 3 tables away from Chad Abernathy, the self-appointed royalty of Oak Meadows High. He wasn't eating, he was holding court. 2 lackeys flanked him, laughing too loud at jokes that weren't funny. Across from them sat a smaller freshman boy, nervously picking at his sandwich. Chad leaned in, grinning that grin that said he was about to make someone's day miserable. "Come on," he said, voice loud enough for half the room to hear. "You forgot your wallet again? Guess you'll owe me lunch money tomorrow, too." The boy's face went red. Around them, laughter rippled like heat off pavement. Tiffany didn't look up at first. She was mid-text, earbuds in, minding her own business. But then she caught it. The tension, the sound of cruelty disguised as humor. She took one slow bite of her apple, turned her head just enough, and said loud enough for the tables nearby to hear, "Wow, I haven't seen a shakedown that clumsy since my dad tried to assemble IKEA furniture." The line landed. The kids nearby laughed, not the polite kind. The real kind. The kind that stings. Chad froze. His grin faltered. His crony stopped laughing. "What did you say?" he asked. Tiffany didn't look up. She just shrugged. "I said, if you're going to steal lunch money, at least do it with style. You look like a bad 80s movie." The room buzzed again. Some kids stifled giggles. Others held their breath. You could almost see Chad's pride deflating. He stood up, tray clattering. His friends followed like trained dogs. He stalked over to Tiffany's table, puffing out his chest, all performative anger. "You think you're funny, new girl?" Tiffany looked up, slow and calm. She locked eyes with him, took another bite of her apple, and chewed deliberately. "Funnier than you, apparently. And I get the feeling that's a pretty low bar." Gasps. A few laughs she didn't intend to earn. Chad's face flushed scarlet. His jaw twitched. He leaned in. "You think you're clever?" She tilted her head. "No, I think you're loud." "That's not the same thing." One of his own friends snorted before he could stop himself. Chad spun on him. "You got something to say?" The friend mumbled, "No, man," and looked down. Tiffany stood now, not in aggression, but confidence. She wasn't tall, but she carried herself like someone who already
Nice
won the
swing.
argument.
Cameras
He said,
love
"Stand up."
angles.
She looked him dead in the eye. "I am standing. On self-respect. You should try it." That line broke something in him. You could see it. His hand twitched. His pride couldn't survive the silence that followed. The slap came fast. Sloppy. The sound hit the room before anyone could react. One sharp crack that silenced everything. A tray dropped somewhere. Someone gasped. Tiffany didn't move. Her head turned with the force, but when she looked back at him, her eyes were cold and clear. "Nice swing," she said softly. "Cameras love angles." And that's when the phones went up. Half the room started recording. Chad suddenly realized what he'd done. The silence, the eyes, the phones, the frozen teachers trying to cut through the crowd. The vice principal shoved through. "Office. Now," Chad pointed, desperate. "She. Save it," the vice principal said, already writing his pink slip. Tiffany didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She just sat back down, finished her apple, and waited. When I got the call an hour later, I didn't breathe until I saw her. She was sitting in the office, calm as ever. Dana was there already, notebook open, pen moving. The vice principal gave us the rundown like he was reading a weather report. There was an altercation during lunch. Both students are suspended pending review. Both? Dana asked without looking up. Yes, Mrs. Bowman. Technically. She was hit, I said. She didn't fight back. He shifted in his chair. We're treating it as pure conflict. Dana finally looked up, slow and surgical. Let me make sure I understand. A boy assaults a girl in a cafeteria full of witnesses, and you call it pure conflict? He mumbled something about policy. Dana smiled, the kind of smile that should come with a legal disclaimer. That's fine. Please note that phrasing in the incident report. That's my wife. Calm, polite, terrifying. Back home, Tiffany told the story again, but this time, she laughed through it. I didn't even see it coming, she said. I thought he was going to yell. Next thing I know, my ears ringing. Grant looked up from his plate. Did it hurt? Barely, she said. He swings like he's allergic to exercise. Dana wrote down times, quotes, names of witnesses. I just sat there, half proud, half horrified. Tiffany twirled her pasta. The worst part? He's not even creative. Stand up. What is this, a sitcom villain? Dana raised her glass. To uncreative bullies. I clinked mine against hers. And to receipts. We thought that was the end of it. A stupid boy with too much ego and too little sense. A slap, a suspension, and a lesson learned. But that was before the next letter arrived. Before the fines. Before the fake video. Before the HOA decided that what happened in that cafeteria wasn't a scandal, it was a declaration of war. Because in Oak Meadows, people like the Abernathists never fight fair. And they just picked a fight with a family that doesn't lose. The day after the slap, our house felt like a courtroom. Dana at the head of the table, notebook open, pen tapping. Tiffany is calm, almost bored. Grant listened in silence, jaw tight. And me, sitting there trying not to put my fist through a wall. It wasn't just anger. It was that helpless, suffocating kind. The kind every parent feels when someone hurts your kid and the system shrugs. The school called us in for a follow-up meeting. That's what they called it. A meeting, like this, about scheduling lunch duty. The vice principal, Mr. Ralston, sat across from us in his beige tie and practiced neutrality. His tone was the same one dentists used before bad news.
Nice swing.
Mr. and Mrs.
Cameras love
Bowman,
angles.
he said. After reviewing the incident, both students will serve a 3-day suspension. I blinked. Both. He nodded, flipping through his paperwork as if the words might make more sense on paper. Yes, in these cases, we try to remain impartial. Dana leaned forward. Her voice stayed calm, but her eyes were sharp enough to cut marble. Let me be clear, she said. A boy struck my daughter in front of a cafeteria full of witnesses. She didn't retaliate. She didn't even raise her voice. So tell me, what exactly are you being impartial about? Ralston swallowed. It's standard practice. We have to treat it as a mutual conflict until both sides are heard. Mutual, I said, my voice rising. You think a 16-year-old girl getting slapped is a mutual conflict? Sir, I understand your frustration, but... Dana raised her hand, stopping me before I could say something I'd regret. She turned back to him, her words slow and surgical. We'll be requesting a written report, signed and time-stamped. Make sure it says, pure conflict. We'll need that exact phrasing. He hesitated. You don't have to. Oh, we do, she said, jotting down every word. That's Dana's superpower. She doesn't argue. She documents. Outside, the late afternoon sun hit us like a spotlight. Tiffany exhaled, annoyed. You two don't have to fight my battles, you know. Dana looked at her. We're not fighting them, honey. We're recording them. I put my hand on Tiffany's shoulder. How are you feeling? Fine, she said, rolling her eyes. His slap didn't even hurt. It's his ego that's bruised. Grant muttered. He's lucky you didn't swing back. Tiffany smiled. Please. I don't fight losers. I quote them. I laughed despite myself. That was Tiffany. Never the victim, always the strategist. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Boys like Chad don't learn lessons. They get rescued. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the porch with a beer, staring at the quiet perfection of Oak Meadows, trimmed hedges, glowing porch lights, every driveway identical. Too quiet. Too fake. Dana came out, barefoot, notebook in hand. She sat next to me and didn't speak for a while. Finally, she said, they won't protect her, Jim. The school. The HOA. None of them will. They protect themselves. I looked at her. So what do we do? She closed the notebook. We handle it our way. That's Dana code for, this isn't over. The next morning, a letter slid through our mail slot. Cream envelope, expensive paper, official seal of the Oak Meadows HOA. At first, I thought it was another welcome notice. It wasn't. Inside was a fine. $200. The violation. Unapproved house number font. At the bottom, in neat, looping handwriting, Richard Abernathy, President. I laughed once, that bitter kind of laugh that tastes like metal. Dana just looked at it, then at me. They're not done, she said quietly. They're just getting started. The letter sat on the kitchen counter like a loaded gun. A simple cream envelope, elegant handwriting, HOA logo embossed at the top, and yet it was the most passive-aggressive threat I'd ever seen. $200. For a font. Apparently, our house numbers, for small metal digits, weren't aesthetically compliant with community design standards. Dana read the letter twice, then set it down with surgical precision. They're testing us, she said. Tiffany leaned over her shoulder. They're finding us for numbers? Grant frowned. What's wrong with the numbers? Nothing, Dana said. Except they weren't chosen by the Emperor and Queen of Oak Meadows. She didn't have to say their names. We all knew who she meant. That night, I sat in my office flipping the letter over and over in my hands. The timing wasn't random. Less than 24 hours after Chad slapped my daughter, his father fined us for typography. Coincidence? Please. This wasn't about fonts. This was about power. Richard Abernathy wasn't just protecting his son. He was sending a message. A quiet, paper-cut kind of message. You think you can embarrass my family? Let's see how long you last here. I wasn't naive. Men like Richard don't shout. They suffocate. They bury you under rules, fines, and fake politeness until you either conform or quit. The next morning, we found another envelope taped to the door. Violation number 2. Grass height exceeds the approved limit by a quarter inch. I stared at the lawn. Perfectly trimmed. Not a weed in sight. I looked up just in time to see Todd, our neighbor and HOA lapdog, walking briskly away with his clipboard. Morning, I called out. He froze mid-step. Just routine inspections. Routine, huh? I said. That must be why you're measuring grass with a ruler. He turned red. Rules are rules, Mr. Bowman. Funny, I said. They only seem to apply to us. By the end of that week, we had 3 violations and 2 warnings. Trash bins visible from street view. Mailbox post leaning slightly left. Unapproved welcome mat. Dana read each one out loud during dinner like she was narrating a crime thriller. Her tone was calm, almost amused. She didn't rant. She planned. We'll respond to every notice in writing, she said. Time-stamped, signed, and copied. They're building a paper trail. We'll build a stronger one. I nodded, but my blood was boiling. You can't reason with people like this. She smiled faintly. Who said anything about reasoning? By week 2, the HOA had officially declared war. They didn't show up with torches. They used clipboards, fine print, and smug smiles. Every day, a new envelope. Every day, a new infraction. The sound of the mail slot started to make my stomach turn. One night, I caught Todd again, taping a notice to our freshly painted door. Thick packing tape, like he was sealing a shipping box. Afternoon, I said, stepping outside. You missed a spot. He jumped. Oh, just following the procedure. Dana appeared behind me, calm as ever. Per bylaw 3.4a, she said evenly. Violations must be mailed or placed in the mailbox, not taped to private property. Todd blinked. I didn't know that. You do now, she said. He peeled the tape off like it was on fire. Tiffany clapped from the porch. We'll rate this delivery 5 beige stars. Todd scurried away, the clipboard trembling in his hand. At that point, most people would have snapped. Most people did. We found out later that we weren't the first family to get buried in violations. The Abernathy's had done it before, to anyone who pushed back, asked questions, or didn't bow low enough at HOA meetings. But Dana? She doesn't break under pressure. She organizes it. She created a binder labeled Oak Meadows, receipts. Every letter, every fine, every time-stamped photo went inside. She even color-coded them. Red tabs for false claims, yellow for procedural errors, blue for harassment patterns. I swear, if the woman ever wanted to start a revolution, she'd do it in bullet points. Still, the tension was eating at us. Grant started cutting the grass twice a week. Tiffany stopped hanging out on the porch. One evening,
Nice swing.
I found her sitting on the
Cameras
steps,
love angles.
quiet. "You okay, kiddo?" I asked. She shrugged. "It's just weird. Everyone at school's seen the video. Half of them call me a hero. The other half think I made it up." I clenched my fists. "You didn't." "I know that," she said. "But they don't. And Chad keeps walking around like nothing happened." The moonlight caught her face, calm, but hurt. That's when I decided, if the Abernathists wanted a war, they'd get one. The next morning, I stood in front of our green door, freshly painted, shining under the porch light, and nailed the first new number plate on the wall. The font was ridiculous. A curvy, over-decorated serif that looked like it belonged on a wedding invitation. It was legal. It was ugly. It was perfect. Dana raised an eyebrow. "That's hideous." "Yep," I said, "but compliant." She smiled. "Petty and precise. I approve." That was our new strategy. Fight their rules with their own rules, one sarcastic victory at a time. I didn't realize then that the petty war was only the opening act. Because the Abernathists weren't satisfied with fines or humiliation. They wanted us gone. And soon, their attacks would move from our lawn to our name. There's a saying, if you can't control the story, rewrite it. And that's exactly what the Abernathists did next. Up until then, the war had been quiet, petty fines, smug smiles, HOA letters printed on recycled arrogance. But one Tuesday morning, the battlefield moved online. It started with a ping. Dana was making coffee when her phone buzzed, then buzzed again. Then again. Notifications flooded in from the Oak Meadows Community Facebook group, a digital neighborhood where gossip dressed itself up as updates. At the top of the feed was a video. A shaky, low-quality clip labeled, "Unruly teen caught bullying HOA president's son, disturbing behavior." The thumbnail froze on Tiffany's face mid-blink, her expression twisted in a frame that made her look angry. Dana tapped the video open. The footage showed the cafeteria scene. Well, part of it. The first half, the one where Chad was yelling and Tiffany was standing there calm, was gone. Instead, it started with Tiffany saying, "Nice swing. Cameras love angles." Then it cut. It made her look smug. It made him look like the victim. And at the end, a caption faded in. Some parents raise bullies. Others raise consequences. Posted by Karen Abernathy. Within minutes, comments exploded. "Unbelievable. That's assault. She seems disrespectful. Poor Chad." Dana's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friends texted asking what happened. Neighbors stopped waving that morning. When I got home from work, she was sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, eyes hard. "They posted a fake video," she said. "I watched it once. Then again. My stomach turned. They'd edited it perfectly, cut the sound, changed the context, framed our daughter as the aggressor." I said, "We'll sue them." Dana didn't look up. "Not yet. Not yet." She pointed to her screen. "We need proof. Metadata. Source. Timing." And just like that, the quiet strategist in her switched on. That night, Tiffany came home from school with her backpack half unzipped and her eyes red. "Don't worry about it," she said before I could even speak. "It's not like they're wrong. I did stand up to him." She tried to play it off, but her voice cracked. Grant sat at the table, fists clenched. "Who did this?" "Who do you think?" she said. "Karen posted it. Half the school's seen it." I took her phone, opened the post, and stared at the comment section. Over 400 reactions.
Nice swing.
Half supportive, half
Cameras
venomous.
love angles.
Dana came over, calm as ever. "We're not responding online," she said. "Not a word. Let them dig their own grave." Tiffany blinked. "You're seriously just gonna let them fight fair?" Dana finished. "No, I'm going to fight smart." For the next 2 nights, Dana barely slept. Her laptop glowed like a war room screen. She pulled the video down from Facebook using an archiving tool, then traced the timestamps on the original upload. The data showed it wasn't recorded from a phone. It was uploaded from a desktop, meaning someone edited it first. She even tracked the embedded GPS tags in the video metadata. Oak Meadows HOA office network. She leaned back in her chair, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Gotcha." We met with a lawyer friend the next day. He watched the video, then looked at the metadata Dana printed. "This is doctored," he said. "If you can prove intent, it's defamation." Dana slid a second file across the table. "And here's proof of intent." Inside was a screenshot of a private message Karen sent to another resident. "If the Bowmans want drama, I'll give them drama. People believe what they see." The lawyer whistled. That's not just petty. That's malicious. But Dana didn't want to sue. At least, not yet. She wanted to expose them. Her plan was simple. Don't fight the lie. Bury it under the truth. She started gathering witness statements. Kids who'd seen the slap. Teachers who'd broken it up. Even one of Chad's own friends, who admitted on video that Karen made us delete the full clip. Every piece went into the binder. The binder that was no longer just receipts, it was evidence. Meanwhile, the HOA pressure kept coming. Another letter. This time, not about grass or fonts. It read, "Due to ongoing disturbances and negative attention brought to our community, your property is under review for non-compliance with neighborhood standards." I read it twice. They're trying to push us out. Dana nodded slowly. And when we leave, they'll say it's because we couldn't handle the rules. Tiffany clenched her jaw. So we don't leave. No, Dana said softly. We don't. That weekend, we fought back. Dana filed a complaint with the school board, complete with unedited footage, witness names, and metadata. She also sent a letter to the HOA, requesting all future communication be written and timestamped, citing harassment and discrimination. Then she did something brilliant. She posted a single message in the Oak Meadows Facebook group. Thank you all for your concern. We'll be sharing the full, unedited video of the cafeteria incident soon. Transparency helps everyone. That was it. No insults. No emotion. Just confidence. Within an hour, the comment section flipped. Wait, there's more footage. Karen, did you edit this? Why hasn't the HOA said anything? Karen deleted her post before midnight. But the internet never forgets. Dana already had screenshots, backups, timestamps, everything. When the full video came out 3 days later, posted by another parent who'd had the original, it went viral across the school. It showed the truth. Chad yelled, "Tiffany is calm." Then the slap. The same people who'd called Tiffany aggressive were now apologizing in the comments. Karen tried to post a retraction. Something about miscommunication. But by then, nobody was listening. The damage was done, just not to us. That night, I found Dana on the porch, binder in her lap. The crickets hummed softly in the dark. You think they'll stop now? I asked. She shook her head. People like them don't stop when they lose. They double down. She
Nice
flipped
swing.
a page,
Cameras
eyes
love
glinting under the
angles.
porch light. And when they do, we'll be ready. What we didn't know then was how far the Abernathists were willing to go. Because if the fake video was their warning shot, the next attack would hit where it hurt most. Our home, our savings, and our peace. And it would come wrapped, once again, in a polite little envelope stamped with the HOA seal. If there's one thing I've learned about war, it's that the loudest victory doesn't come from shouting. It comes from quiet people smiling while they sharpen their pencils. And that was exactly what Dana was doing. By the time the fake video drama died down, the HOA had already fired its next shot. A letter arrived titled, "Notice of Accumulated Violations. Urgent Action Required. Total balance due, $1,725. The list was ridiculous. Mailbox paint is not reflective enough. Improperly placed bird feeder. Front porch light emits non-standard hue. Non-standard hue? What was that even supposed to mean? Too warm of a glow. I laughed when I read it. Dana didn't. She took a slow sip of coffee and said, "They're baiting us." I nodded. Then let's take the bait. That night, the Bowmans officially went from defensive to offensive. We held what Tiffany called our family war council. Notebooks, whiteboard, snacks. We mapped out every HOA rule, bylaw, and loophole. Dana printed the 87-page HOA handbook, the one most neighbors never read past page 3, and highlighted every contradiction she could find. Their own wording is sloppy, she said. They can't enforce half of this. Tiffany grinned. So we used their rules against them. Grant leaned back. This is going to be fun. The next day, Dana sent her first letter. Formal, perfectly worded, and loaded with legal precision. Dear HOA, we respectfully request detailed documentation and photographic evidence of all cited violations per Bylaw 2.3c. Failure to provide said evidence within 10 business days will render all fines void under Bylaw 1.7f. Translation: prove it or shut up. They didn't respond. Instead, 2 days later, another letter appeared. This time, the fine was for improperly displayed decorative elements. Dana walked outside, stared at our front porch, and said, "You mean the pumpkins?" It was October. Everyone had pumpkins. But apparently, ours were too gaudy. I looked across the street at Karen Abernathy's front porch. She had 12 pumpkins, a life-size scarecrow, and a fog machine. I smiled. Gaudy, huh? The next day, I bought 30 pumpkins, stacked them into a pyramid on our lawn. Then I printed out a big sign that said, "Pumpkin display approved by HOA guidelines." Tiffany laughed so hard she nearly dropped her phone recording it. Grant just nodded. Strategic compliance. I like it. That video. Half the neighborhood watched it by nightfall. Even Todd, the clipboard guy, couldn't hide his smirk when he walked past. By week 2, our war wasn't quiet anymore. Every time they find us, we responded with extreme obedience. They find us for the bird feeder? We installed 5 bird feeders, each labeled compliant under Section 5.2a. They claimed our mailbox was too glossy. We sanded it, painted it matte beige, then mailed them a thank you note for aesthetic guidance. And when they find us for excessive decorative signage, we printed that exact rule, framed it, and hung it on the porch. Dana called it performance compliance. Tiffany called it petty art. Grant just said, we're trolling them legally. And it worked. But the Abernathysts weren't laughing. Karen's Facebook posts turned cryptic. Some families bring drama into good neighborhoods. It's sad when people don't know their place. She didn't tag us, of course. She didn't need to. Every post came with a flood of passive-aggressive comments from her inner circle. But the tide was shifting, because the more she complained, the more people noticed her hypocrisy. One neighbor, Ruth from Maple Lane, even commented publicly, "Funny, my mailbox is the same color as the Bowman's. Should I expect a fine too?" That comment got 80 likes. For the first time, the Abernathysts were losing control of their audience. Meanwhile, Dana kept building her binder, thicker, heavier, unstoppable. She logged every notice, every timestamp, every letter's postmark. She photographed every compliant lawn and every hypocritical infraction the HOA ignored. When I asked why she was doing it, she said one line I'll never forget. Because when the time comes, we won't argue. We'll prove. One Saturday morning, Richard himself showed up at our door. Buttoned up, golf visor on, holding his ever-present clipboard. "Mr. Bowman," he said with that condescending smile. "You've become quite the entertainer." I leaned on the doorframe. "Just following the rules, Richard. You taught us well." His smile twitched. "You think this is funny? You're mocking the HOA." "Oh no," I said. "I'm honoring it." Behind me, Dana stepped into view, holding the binder. "Would you like to review our compliance records?" He blinked. "Your what?" She opened it slowly, pages thick with color-coded tabs. Every letter, every violation, every date. "We're fully documented. Want a copy for your records?" Richard's jaw tightened. "That won't be necessary." He left without another word. Tiffany leaned out the door after him. "Bye, Mr. Abernathy. Say hi to your editor-in-chief." He didn't look back. From that day forward, something shifted. The HOA still sent letters, but slower. The tone softened. We'd turned their own system against them, and for the first time, they didn't know how to respond. But Dana didn't let up. Every evening, she updated her binder. Every morning, she backed up her files. I told her, "You've got enough to bury them." She said, "Not yet. They'll make one more move. They always do." She was right. Because the Abernathysts couldn't stand losing control. And when people like that can't win with rules, they change the game. It started with whispers, rumors about our financial troubles, about me yelling at HOA meetings, about Tiffany being unstable. Then came the big one, a certified letter marked urgent. Inside, special community assessment, $10,000 per household to cover legal expenses arising from recent community conflicts. And just like that, the HOA wasn't just playing dirty anymore. They'd gone nuclear. For weeks, Tiffany had been the center of the storm. The fake video, the HOA fines, the gossip. Every hallway whisper in school seemed to have her name attached. But what no one realized, not even us, was that while Tiffany fought with words, her brother Grant was silently planning his own move. It happened on a Thursday. Gray skies, midterms week, the kind of day where even the hallways felt tired. Grant was at his locker, earbuds in, hoodie up, trying to mind his own business. He heard it before he saw it, that laugh. Chad Abernathy. That same laugh that had filled the cafeteria weeks ago. The one that dripped with entitlement and arrogance. "Hey, Bowman." Chad called. Grant didn't answer. He felt a shove on his shoulder.
Nice
Chad
swing.
again, smirking.
Cameras love
Don't
angles.
ignore me. I'm talking to you, loser. Grant pulled out his earbuds. Calm. Voice even. What do you want, Chad? What? No clever comeback like your sister. Grant just stared at him. Did you really come here to talk about her? That landed. Chad's smirk faltered. Just a second, then came back sharper. She's a joke. The whole school saw her get caught live. Everyone knows she faked that video to make me look bad. Grant didn't blink. Funny, I saw the unedited version. That got a few snickers from nearby students. The crowd was forming. Teenagers love drama. Chad's face reddened. You calling me a liar? Grant closed his locker, turned fully toward him. No, I'm calling you irrelevant. The hallway went quiet. For the first time, Chad didn't look in control. He stepped closer, puffing his chest. You got a big mouth for a freshman. Grant's voice didn't change. Calm. Low. Controlled. I'm not a freshman. I'm just someone who's done listening to your garbage. A few phones came out. You could feel it. The energy, the tension, the weight of the moment. Then, like clockwork, Chad did what a Bernithus do best. He made it physical. He shoved Grant. Hard. The crowd gasped. Grant stumbled back a step, but didn't fall. He steadied himself, eyes locked. You don't want to do that. Chad sneered. What are you going to do, tough guy? Sue me like your mommy. Grant took one slow breath. And then Chad swung. It wasn't even a good punch. Wild, desperate, messy. Grant sidestepped effortlessly, caught Chad's wrist, pivoted, and sent him sprawling to the floor in one clean, practiced motion. The crowd erupted. Chad landed hard, flat on his back, air punched out of him. He wheezed, eyes wide, tears forming. Grant didn't hit him, didn't taunt him. He just stood over him and said, quietly enough for only a few to hear, You hit my sister once. That was your free one. Then he turned, picked up his backpack, and walked away. The phones were still recording. By the time he reached the end of the hall, Chad was the one crying on the floor, poetic symmetry in full HD. The video spread faster than wildfire. Within hours, everyone had seen it. This time, no editing. No fake captions. Just raw, perfect karma. Tiffany found out before we did. She came home that afternoon with tears in her eyes. But this time, they were laughing too hard. Mom, Dad, you need to see this. She handed over her phone. There was Grant, calm and silent as a storm, flipping Chad like it was a chore. Dana watched the video once, then turned to our son. Did you start it? No, he said. Did you finish it? Yes, ma'am. She nodded once. Then I don't see a problem. Of course, the school tried to turn it into a mutual altercation again. But this time, the footage was clear. No spin, no bias, just truth. And the best part? When they called Richard Abernathy in for a meeting, he had to sit through the same humiliation his son had put us through. He blustered, shouted about provocation, threatened to speak to the board. But the vice principal, the same man who'd once called Tiffany's assault a peer conflict, didn't flinch. He said, Mr. Abernathy, your son has been suspended. We're also forwarding this to the district board. Richard's face turned the color of his golf shirts. For once, his power didn't matter. That night, we had dinner like it was a holiday. Pizza, laughter, relief. Grant barely spoke, as usual. Tiffany did enough for both of them. She toasted him with her soda can. To my silent hero, she said. He smirked.
Nice swing.
You're the loud
Cameras
one.
love
I'm just the
angles.
cleanup crew. Dana laughed. Teamwork makes the dream work. And me? I just sat back, watching them both. Two kids who'd faced down the entire Abernathy dynasty, and one without losing their integrity. For the first time in weeks, the house felt light again. No tension, no fear. Just us, together. But as the laughter faded, I saw Dana flipping through her binder again. She wasn't celebrating. She was checking dates, matching files, connecting dots. Still working? I asked. She didn't look up. They're not done. This was just the kids' chapter. The adults always take it further. I frowned. Further how? She looked up, eyes calm but steely. They'll go for money next. They always do. She was right. Because less than a week later, we'd find out just how far the Abernathy's were willing to go to protect their empire. And this time, they wouldn't just be after our reputation. They'd be after everything we owned. There's a point in every battle where the enemy stops pretending to be polite. When the smiles fade, the paperwork turns into weapons, and the game stops being about pride. It becomes about power. For the Abernathy's, That moment came on a Friday morning. It arrived, as always, in an envelope. This one was thicker, heavier, stamped with bold red letters across the front. Urgent, HOA Special Assessment Notice. Dana sliced it open with her nail file. Her eyes scanned the first paragraph, and then froze. She handed it to me without a word. I read it twice before I believed it. Effective immediately, all Oak Meadows residents are required to pay a special assessment fee of $10,000 per household to cover unplanned legal expenses resulting from recent community conflicts. $10,000. Due in 30 days. Non-payment would result in property liens and possible foreclosure. My jaw locked. They can't do this. Dana's voice was calm, but her hands trembled. They just did. I called Richard Abernathy that afternoon. Straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I drove straight to the HOA office, a tidy little brick building next to the community center. Richard was there, of course, behind his oversized mahogany desk, the smell of coffee and self-importance thick in the air. He looked up when I walked in, that smug half-smile already in place. "Ah, Mr. Bowman. I was just about to reach out." I held up the letter. "This is a joke, right?" "Hardly," he said, leaning back. "The HOA has suffered significant reputation damage thanks to the recent drama. Legal representation is expensive. You're charging 10 grand to fix your son's reputation?" Richard sighed, like he was dealing with a difficult child. "It's not about my son, Mr. Bowman. It's about the community." "Then why is your lawyer's name on the bottom of the invoice?" That wiped the smile off his face for half a second. Then it returned, thinner this time. "Refusal to comply will result in liens. It's in the bylaws." I leaned forward, close enough to smell the mint on his breath. "Try it. I dare you." Back home, Dana was already deep into research mode. Laptop open. Papers spread across the table. She'd printed every page of the HOA's bylaws, all 184 of them, and started dissecting them line by line. "Listen to this," she said, reading aloud. Section 9.2b. Special assessments may only be levied for shared community repairs, maintenance, or natural disaster response. She looked up. "Legal fees don't qualify. So it's fake." "Not fake," she said, flipping another page.
"Nice swing.
"It's abuse."
Cameras love
That night,
angles.
she called a meeting, not just with us, but with our neighbors. For the first time, people showed up angry. Todd, the clipboard guy, spoke first. "They fined me for parking too close to my own driveway last week," he said. "And now this." Ruth from Maple Lane held up her own envelope. "They can't take my home over this, can they?" Dana stood, calm but commanding. "Everyone, listen. This assessment is illegal. They're using it to pay off lawsuits. They're lawsuits, not ours. If we stand alone, they'll scare us into paying. But if we stand together, they lose their leverage." The room buzzed. For the first time, people weren't whispering. They were agreeing. Tiffany leaned over and whispered to me, "Mom's starting a revolution." I smiled. She always does. She just calls it a meeting. Over the next few days, Dana became the quiet leader of Oak Meadows. She drafted letters for neighbors, citing bylaws and codes. She filed an injunction request with the county clerk's office. And she started digging into where all that legal expense money was really going. That's when she found it. Hidden in the HOA's quarterly financial disclosure, a single line item. Consulting fee $48,000. Vance Property Group. "Who's Vance?" I asked. Dana turned her laptop around. A sleek real estate developer's website filled the screen. Big smiles. Bigger promises. Arthur Vance, founder, Vance Property Group. He specialized in community redevelopment projects, which was a nice way of saying he bought struggling neighborhoods cheap and flipped them into luxury estates. Her voice was cold. "He's been paying Richard kickbacks for every family that moves out. That's why they push people until they leave." Suddenly, everything made sense. The endless fines, the harassment, the fake video, the legal fees. They weren't just trying to humiliate us. They were trying to drive us out. Because if we left, Richard and Vance got paid. Dana sat back in her chair, binder open, a 1,000-yard stare in her eyes. "This isn't a feud anymore," she said quietly. "It's a racket." I looked at her, at our kids sitting in the living room, at the house we'd built together. They wanted to take everything from us. Our home, our peace, our dignity. And right then, I decided, not 1 inch. The next morning, Dana wrote the most important letter of the entire war. Dear HOA Board, we are formally requesting an independent audit of all HOA financial activity over the past 12 months, including but not limited to payments made to Vance Property Group. Failure to comply within 14 days will be considered an admission of financial misconduct. She signed it neatly, slid it into an envelope, and handed it to me. Drop this off personally, she said. I looked at her. You think they'll back down? She smiled faintly. No, I think they'll panic. And panic they did. Because within a week, Richard Abernathy stopped smiling. His son stopped strutting. And the perfect, plastic piece of Oak Meadows began to crack. We hadn't just poked the bear. We'd pulled the mask off the entire circus. And soon, everyone in Oak Meadows would see what was hiding underneath the perfect lawns and polite smiles. Ours came at 2:13 a.m. on a Thursday, when my wife whispered the words that would change everything. I found it. The house was dark. Everyone else is asleep. Dana sat in her usual spot, kitchen table, laptop glowing, binder open like a weapon. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. Her eyes were red, focused, alive. She turned the screen toward me. On it was a spreadsheet, columns of numbers, names, addresses. What is this? I asked. The HOA's property transfer records, she said. Public documents. It took some digging, but look here. She pointed at a list of homes, addresses we recognized. The Harrisons, the Lee family, the Ortiz couple, all families who'd moved out of Oak Meadows in the past 2 years. Next to each name was a sales record, and every one of them had one thing in common: purchased by Vance Property Group. My stomach dropped. You're saying Vance bought all these houses? Dana nodded. Right after each family got buried in fake fines and assessments. She clicked another tab, an HOA expense report. 2 lines were highlighted. Consulting services, Vance Property Group, $48,000. Community improvement planning, $32,000. Community improvement, she said. That's their code for payoff. She stood and paced, running her hand through her hair. Think about it, she said. They find people exhausted. They pressure them with lawsuits. Families move out. Vance buys the homes cheap, renovates, flips them. Richard gets a cut under consulting fees. It's a closed-loop scam. My chest tightened. How many families? 14 in the last 2 years. 14. She nodded grimly. And we're supposed to be number 15. I sat down hard, rubbing my temples. It wasn't just corruption. It was organized, calculated, an entire system built on intimidation and greed. And every smiling neighbor barbecue, every welcome to the community email, all of it was part of the illusion. They didn't run a neighborhood. They ran a machine. The next day, Dana went full investigator. She called the county records office, confirmed Vance's shell companies. She traced payment accounts through HOA reports and matching dates. Every dollar Richard approved led back to Vance. At one point, she said, "You know what this means, right?" I nodded. "We're sitting on evidence of fraud." "Not just fraud," she said. "Collusion, tax evasion, maybe racketeering." She smiled a little, tired but triumphant. "I told you we'd get there." That weekend, we turned our garage into a command center. Laptop cables, printouts, sticky notes everywhere. Tiffany made color-coded timelines on the whiteboard. Grant helped cross-reference old HOA meeting notes. Dana built what she called the web. It was a giant corkboard with red string connecting everything: families, properties, payments, signatures. Every pin told a story of someone bullied, fined, or driven out. And every line pointed back to 2 names: Richard Abernathy and Arthur Vance. At one point, Tiffany looked up from the board and said, "Mom, this is like a movie." Dana didn't even look up. "No, movies end in 2 hours. This one's still playing." Grant added, "So what's next?" She glanced at him, expression shifting into that calm, strategic focus we'd come to recognize. "Next," she said, "we make them confess." That night, Dana laid out the plan. We couldn't just expose them. We had to make them bury themselves. The HOA's next quarterly meeting was in 2 weeks. Richard would be there. So would Vance, as the consultant. And that was when we'd strike. But to pull it off, we needed proof straight from the source. Emails. Conversations. Something undeniable. Dana's idea was simple and brilliant. We'd bait them. 3 days later, we sent a polite, professional email to the HOA board. After careful consideration, the Bowman family is open to discussing
Nice
a
swing.
potential property sale
Cameras love
to resolve
angles.
ongoing tensions. We would prefer to keep the matter private and avoid legal escalation. Within 4 hours, we had a response. From Vance himself. I'd be happy to meet and discuss options. Discretion is always appreciated. Dana smiled when she read it. Hook, line, and sinker. The meeting was set for Thursday. At our house, 2 p.m. Dana cleaned the living room like we were hosting royalty. But behind the bookshelf, she hid a small camera, motion activated, for K, sound enabled. Her plan wasn't just to talk. It was to record everything. Vance arrived exactly on time. Perfect suit, slick smile, cologne strong enough to smell from the driveway. He shook my hand, his grip firm but cold. Mr. Bowman, Mrs. Bowman, he said smoothly. It's in everyone's interest to put this unpleasantness behind us. Dana smiled politely. We agree. He sat down, crossed his legs. I understand you've had difficulties with the HOA. Sometimes things get blown out of proportion. Dana nodded. It's been stressful. We're just wondering if it might be better to move on. Vance smiled. You're wise people. I can make you a fair offer. If you agree to sell quickly, we can even waive certain penalties. Penalties? I asked, playing dumb. He nodded casually. Yes, those pesky fines. You know how Richard gets. Always so by the book. Dana tilted her head. So you and Richard work closely? Of course, Vance said, leaning forward. He brings me opportunities. I make sure he's compensated. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. That was it. The confession. Clean. Perfect. Caught on camera. After he left, Dana checked the footage. Clear audio. Perfect visual. She exhaled for the first time in hours. We've got him, she whispered. That night, we sat together on the porch. The house was quiet, the air heavy with summer. Tiffany asked, so what happens now? Dana smiled softly. Now, sweetheart, they learn what happens when you try to bully the wrong family. Grant chuckled. You're really gonna drop the hammer, huh? Dana didn't blink. Not yet. We're saving that for the meeting. I looked at her, my calm, brilliant wife, and realized something. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. They'd built an empire of fear, and we were about to burn it down with evidence. Once you have a confession on tape, what you do next matters more than how you got it. Dana's rule was simple. Evidence doesn't scare people. Exposure does. So if we already had Vance admitting the scheme, the next step was to create a situation where his arrogance would do the rest, where he'd confess again, in public and in front of witnesses, and where the money trail would be impossible to deny. We decided to play the part they expected. We would look like beaten, exhausted prey. We would stage a surrender. We would make ourselves the easy sale. Dana wrote the email with surgical calm. The tone was heartbreak, not threat. We're considering an expedited sale. We're overwhelmed by HOA fines and can't afford the assessment. We're open to an offer. She sounded resigned enough to be believable. I hit send and felt the tiniest tremor of dread and elation at the same time. The response came almost immediately. Arthur Vance, in his oily, practiced way, offered a discreet meeting and assured us this would be handled privately. He wanted to bring cash to show we could trust him. Of course he did. Predators love cash. It's tactile, uncomplicated, and impossible to argue about until you mark it. We had to make the money speak. Dana called her sister's friend, a notary acquaintance who owed us
Nice
a favor,
swing.
and arranged to
Cameras
have a
love
mobile
angles.
notary present the day the cash arrived. She also had Grant and Tiffany withdraw a stack of hundreds in increments, so the serial numbers wouldn't be linked through bank logs all at once. We photographed every bill. Then, in a tiny, ridiculous detail that would later matter, Dana used a UV pen to write a tiny, almost invisible initial on each bill's white border. Nobody sees a dot of UV ink under daylight, but under the right light, the initials glittered like a secret star map. I thought the whole thing sounded theatrical, and it was. But in war, theater is a weapon if your opponent believes the script. We set the house up like a stage. Dana went to work on the living room. Clean, plain, unremarkable. She hid 3 little cameras. One in the frame of a digital photo display, one tucked in the spine of a bookshelf, and one that looked like a screw head on the mantel. She placed a battery-operated coffee urn on the table because we'd learned he liked to be served. The real trick, she'd had a small microphone embedded into the base of a travel mug. To any guest, it would feel warm and normal. To us, it was a broadcast-grade recorder. When Arthur Vance arrived the next afternoon, he wore his confidence like cologne. He strode through the door like he owned the place and set his leather briefcase on the dining table like it was a prop in his own fantasy. He praised our good sense for wanting a quick sale, patted my shoulder with faux sympathy, and asked if we wanted coffee. He was playing his part, too. Of course he was. Dana poured the coffee herself, hands steady as a surgeon's. She slid the bugged mug across to him with a smile that could hold a secret. I sat at the corner of the table, a defeated man for the audience. Tiffany drifted in and out of sight, the kid who'd give the performance of misery when the cameras focused. Grant pretended to be sulky and withdrawn, the family that needed a way out. Conversation began with polite lines about market conditions and comparable sales. Vance made offers, lowball numbers wrapped in honeyed words about discretion and helping the community. He said what he'd always said: we could be saved from the fines. He said Richard keeps standards high, and he smiled in that way that means you should be afraid of what he does with his smile. Then he made his mistake. He relaxed. Predators always do when the prey looks broken. You know how this goes, he said, voice low so it felt private. Richard keeps the neighborhood pure. I take properties that get overwhelmed. We make it easy. You take our offer, the fines disappear. It's clean business. The mug recorded every syllable. The little cameras took in his hands, his face, the way his eyes slid around the room as if counting exits. Dana asked the question that crushed him. So you and Richard are working together on this? Commissions? Kickbacks? He chuckled, too confident. It's not that literal. We help each other. He points me to opportunities. I manage the aftermath. Everyone wins. Every win he described sounded like a racket when recorded in a living room with a camera on him. He called it mutually beneficial. He called it community improvement. We called it extortion. Then he reached for his briefcase and, like a man who believed cash was magic, pulled out a stack of hundreds. I'll leave 10,000 with you as a deposit, he said. Show me you'll take the deal and we'll settle everything privately. He placed the cash on the table. He smoothed the bills with a practiced hand. He believed possession was seduction. He didn't notice the way the light hit the edges of the bills and how Dana's fingers had already photographed every serial number. He didn't notice the UV initials waiting to glow under the right lamp. I felt my chest tighten. Everything after this would be the laws to do. But we needed one more act, the public bait, to force their hand. I looked him in the eye and said the line the trap required. We can't afford $10,000 right now. I let the defeat hang there like a curtain. He nodded, triumphant, and reached for the money again. That's the moment we'd rehearsed. Tiffany stepped forward and, in the perfect impulsive kid move, picked up the stack of bills. We should probably count this, she said loud enough for any neighbor peeking through curtains to hear. Vance smiled with wolfish relief and began counting. He was so busy with the bills that he didn't see the way Dana's lips pressed into a single thin line. He didn't see the lamp hovering in the doorway, the small blue light we'd reserved. He didn't hear the soft radio signal Dana pressed to the sheriff's dispatch. Outside, on a quiet suburban street, we had already briefed a fraud detective. He'd been watching for hours, hands in his coat pockets, eyes on the windows. When Dana gave the signal, a small nod toward the porch light, he called 2 patrol cars forward. Within minutes, uniforms filled the driveway. Vance's face collapsed in a way that no suit can hide. He tried to laugh it off, tried to make the payment a simple transaction. This is a private matter, he said. We can work this out. An officer interrupted with a voice that wasn't interested in working it out. Sir, put your hands where we can see them. It happened so quickly that the neighbors who'd peeked out their curtains thought they were watching a TV show. Vance went from predator to defendant in the time it took the cuffs to click. The briefcase stayed on the table like evidence on a stage. Later, in the police report, the marked bills would be listed as a critical chain of evidence. The coffee mug's audio would be transcribed into the complaint. The cameras would provide the visuals. But in that second, when the door opened and uniformed officers walked in, I felt something swell in my chest I can't put a name to. Not victory, not yet. It was the justice of a plan that worked because ordinary people refused to be intimidated. It smelled like the first rain after a long drought. Vance got hauled away. We let the cameras follow them out. For the neighbors who'd believed the Abernathy narrative, this was a collapse. For those who'd looked the other way, it was a wake-up call. Dana closed the binder and thumbed the pages like a general shelving a campaign. She sat next to me on the couch and finally let herself breathe. They wanted us to be quiet, she said. They wanted us to be convenient. I put my arm around her. Tiffany bounced onto the couch, grinning. Grant came in, expression unreadable but steady. The house felt like ours again. We hadn't burned the whole thing down. Not yet. But we had lit the match. And at the next HOA meeting, the whole room would get to watch the flames spread. When a liar finally runs out of words, all that's left is silence and the sound of their own voice playing back at them. For Richard Abernathy, that moment came on a warm Thursday night under the fluorescent lights of the Oak Meadows clubhouse. The HOA quarterly meeting. Every chair was filled. Neighbors who'd once whispered now sat in rows, arms crossed, waiting. They'd heard the rumors about Vance's arrest, about the money, about corruption. Richard stood at the front, chest puffed out like a man about to deliver a sermon. He'd already decided his version of the truth. He began with a voice dripping in false humility. I know there's been confusion in recent years. Our beloved community has faced challenges, but I assure you, we're handling them with transparency and professionalism. I almost laughed.
Nice swing.
Transparency?
Cameras love
From a man
angles.
who fined me for mailbox gloss. Dana sat beside me, binder in her lap, calm as ever. Tiffany had her phone ready. Grant leaned against the wall, arms folded, silent, observant. Richard continued. I want everyone to disregard the malicious rumors circulating about our association's finances. Certain individuals, he looked right at us, have chosen to stir unnecessary drama. He smiled, smug and practiced. And that's when Dana stood. She didn't shout. She didn't accuse me. She simply said, Mr. Abernathy, may we have a few minutes to address the community? He hesitated, smirking. This is an HOA meeting, Mrs. Bowman, not a courtroom. Dana smiled. Then you won't mind a little transparency. Without waiting for permission, she opened her laptop, connected the HDMI cable to the projector, and hit play. The room fell silent. The screen flickered. Arthur Vance appeared, smooth suit, expensive smile, sitting in our living room. And then his voice filled the room. Richard keeps the neighborhood pure. I take properties that get overwhelmed. We make it easy. You take our offer, the fines disappear. It's clean. Business. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Vance chuckled on the recording. He brings me opportunities. I make sure he's compensated. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. The words hung in the air like poison. Richard froze. His lips parted, but no sound came out. The color drained from his face. Karen, sitting in the second row, grabbed his arm. Richard, she whispered. He stood abruptly. This is nonsense. Fabricated. You can't. Dana hit pause and turned to the crowd. Mr. Abernathy, that recording was authenticated by the county sheriff's office following Mr. Vance's arrest. The cash you provided to Mr. Vance was seized as evidence. Marked bills, all documented. She lifted a clear folder from her binder and held it up. Would you like to see the receipts? The room erupted. Whispers, gasps, murmurs turning into outrage. One neighbor shouted, You've been stealing from us. Another, I paid that assessment. You pocketed it. Richard tried to speak, but every sound he made was drowned out by voices he used to control. For the first time, the king of Oak Meadows was surrounded and powerless. Then came the moment that broke him completely. Tiffany stood up, phone in hand, camera recording. She looked straight at Richard and said, calm and clear, You called my family liars. You said I made everything up. But now, everyone's heard the truth. Her voice didn't waver. You taught this community to fear you. We just taught them how to stop. The room applauded, soft at first, then louder, until even the people in the back stood. Richard's hands trembled. His carefully built empire of fines and fear had crumbled in a single evening. Two deputies entered quietly through the back door. The sheriff's office had been waiting outside, ready for this moment. Mr. Abernathy, one said, We need you to come with us. He didn't fight. He didn't shout. He just stared at Dana as they led him away. You think you've won, he said bitterly. You don't understand how deep this goes. Dana looked him dead in the eye. Oh, I understand perfectly. You just finally ran out of people to hide behind. When he was gone, the room stayed silent for a long moment, then burst into applause. Neighbors came up one by one, shaking Dana's hand, thanking her. Todd, the clipboard guy, said softly, You did what we were all too scared to do. Dana smiled, tired but proud.
Nice swing.
No, We just stopped letting them define the rules. That night, back at home, we sat on the porch under the quiet hum of streetlights. Tiffany leaned her head on my shoulder. Grant scrolled through his phone. The video of Richard's public humiliation was already circulating online. Shared, reposted, reshared. Justice, in the age of social media, moves fast. Dana closed her binder for the last time. One down, she said softly. One to go. Because while Richard was in custody, his partner, the man who'd built the whole scheme, still had strings left to pull. And we weren't done pulling them loose. The community hall smelled faintly of coffee and cheap carpet cleaner. Rows of folding chairs faced a projector screen that still glowed beige from the last slide. Budget review. Lawn fertilizer efficiency. Around 70 residents sat quietly, scrolling their phones or pretending to listen. At the front, Richard Abernathy stood behind the podium like a mayor addressing his kingdom. His wife, Karen, sat nearby, nodding on cue. As your HOA president, he said, I'm proud to report that Oak Meadows continues to maintain the highest property standards in the county. Polite, mechanical applause followed. He smiled wider. And with your support, we'll keep it that way. From the back row, Dana Bowman closed her notebook. We have something to add to that, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried, clear and steady. Heads turned. Richard froze mid-gesture. Mrs. Bowman, the agenda is closed. If you have a grievance, you may submit. This isn't a grievance, Dana said. It's evidence. A murmur rippled through the room. I stood and lifted the small projector I'd brought in a backpack, set it on a chair, and plugged in a cable. The screen behind Richard flickered once, then replaced his pie charts with a single frozen image, a spreadsheet of HOA fines issued over the past 3 years. The hall went silent except for the hum of the projector fan. Dana stepped forward. We pulled these numbers from the Public Records Office. You'll notice something interesting. 27 families fined repeatedly for minor violations, and 27 of those homes sold within 6 months. All of them belong to the same development company. Someone near the front whispered, That's my street. Another voice, Ours too. Richard's smile faltered. This is out of context, he said quickly. Data can be misleading. Then let's add context, Dana replied. She clicked the remote. The next slide appeared, a map of the neighborhood dotted with red pins. Every pin represents a family pressured to sell. The buyers? A company owned by one of your business partners. A ripple of gasps rolled through the hall. At the side of the room, Karen stood, flustered. This is outrageous. You can't just. I can, Dana said calmly. Because it's all documented. Dates, signatures, bank transfers. I spoke from the aisle. We thought we were alone when the fine started. Turns out, none of us were. A man in the third row raised his hand. They fined me for a missing shingle, then told me to use an approved contractor. Guess whose company it was? Another neighbor stood. Same with my mailbox. The energy in the room shifted, fear giving way to fury. People turned toward Richard, who was still gripping the podium, his knuckles white. He tried to speak over them. Everyone calm down. These are baseless accusations from a family with a personal vendetta. Dana didn't flinch, then let the records speak for themselves. She clicked again. The projector switched to a short audio clip. No names, no shouting.
Nice swing.
Just a calm voice
Cameras
explaining
love
that
angles.
pressure from the board encouraged quick sales. The words weren't aggressive, they were matter of fact. Honest. When the clip ended, you could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing. Karen whispered something to her husband. He ignored her. You have no right to record anyone, he said, his voice cracking slightly. We didn't, Dana replied. This was a public statement made during a board call that was already logged in the minutes. We just made it visible. A woman near the door stood up. So all this time, those fines weren't about rules. They were about profit. The room erupted. Voices overlapped. Anger, disbelief, relief that the pattern finally had a name. Richard tried to restore order, banging the podium. Please, let's maintain decorum. But decorum was gone. Years of polite fear had finally broken. From somewhere in the back, a man shouted, We want a vote. Others echoed it. Vote. Vote. Dana waited for the noise to crest, then said clearly, We're requesting an immediate vote of no confidence in the current board. All in favor. Hands shot up. Almost everyone. The sound of approval wasn't applause. It was the collective exhale of a neighborhood taking its voice back. Richard's shoulders sagged. You don't understand what you're doing, he muttered. I stepped closer to the front. We understand perfectly. We're ending it. The moderator, a mild-mannered accountant who looked stunned to find himself at the center of a revolt, cleared his throat. Motion carried. Effective immediately, the board is dissolved pending new elections. For a moment, no one moved. Then the crowd began to talk all at once. Neighbors sharing stories, trading notes, comparing letters and screenshots. Years of silence turned into a flood of connection. Karen gathered her papers with shaking hands. You'll regret this, she said under her breath. Dana closed her notebook. No, she said. We'll rebuild it. Richard stepped away from the podium, eyes darting, the confident host reduced to a guest in his own room. No one booed. No one shouted. They just looked at him, and in that look was the real punishment, recognition. The meeting dissolved into chatter and laughter, that awkward kind of laughter people use when tension breaks. I packed up the projector, heart still pounding, and looked at Dana. She smiled, tired, proud. Outside, the night air felt electric. Porch lights blinked across the subdivision, but they didn't look identical anymore. They looked alive, like signals. Neighbors were still talking on the steps, comparing stories, planning reforms. Tiffany and Grant waited by the car, both grinning. Did it work? Tiffany asked. I nodded. Better than we imagined. Dana squeezed my hand. Truth's loud when you give it a microphone. We stood there for a moment, watching the clubhouse lights dim behind us, the glow fading on the big white letters that said Oak Meadows Community Association. For the first time, it felt like those words meant everyone. 2 days after the meeting, Oak Meadows felt different. The air was lighter. Neighbors who used to stare at the ground now waved across lawns. The rumor mill that once carried gossip now carried relief. The truth had finally settled in, and everyone could breathe again. But for me, the story wasn't finished yet. Loose ends never sit quietly. Late one afternoon, I was loading tools into my truck when a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb. The window lowered halfway. Inside sat Vance, the property developer whose name had appeared in Dana's charts during the meeting. He smiled like a man still pretending the storm hadn't reached him. Jim, he said smoothly, you and your wife put on quite a show. I kept my hands on the tailgate. We didn't perform. We just told the truth. He leaned forward. Truth is expensive, but everything has a price, doesn't it? Maybe there's a way to make this quieter. I felt that old anger rise, but before I could answer, Dana stepped out onto the porch. She didn't raise her voice, she just held up her phone. Funny thing, she said. The community board asked us to document any follow-up conversations. For transparency, Vance froze. The phone screen glowed red, recording. Behind him, 2 neighbors were already crossing the street, phones out too. He realized he was on display again, not in control, but under the same scrutiny he once used to intimidate others. He rolled the window up without another word and drove off. No shouting, no threats, just silence, the kind that comes when power finally meets daylight. That evening, the neighborhood gathered once more at the clubhouse. Not for confrontation this time, but for celebration. Folding tables held homemade pies, coffee urns, laughter. Kids ran around without anyone worrying about rules for approved play zones. The interim committee, 3 volunteers who'd stepped forward after the vote, stood at the front of the room. We're starting fresh, one of them said. Open books, open meetings, open hands. Applause erupted, genuine and warm. Dana and I stood in the back, hand in hand. Tiffany was filming clips for the new community page she'd created, Oak Meadows United. Grant helped stack chairs, grinning more than I'd seen him in months. A woman I barely knew came up to us. I wanted to thank you, she said. I thought we'd never be able to speak up. You reminded us we could. Dana smiled. It wasn't just us. It was everyone who decided fear wasn't the rule anymore. Outside, dusk settled over the rows of houses. Porch lights blinked on one by one, not identical, but uniquely warm. For once, the sameness that the old board enforced had been replaced by individuality. It looked like a real neighborhood instead of a brochure. Tiffany came running over, holding up her phone. You're trending again, Dad, she said. Someone clipped Mom's line about truth and microphones. It's blowing up on local feeds. I laughed. Guess honesty finally went viral. Dana gave me that sideways grin. Don't get used to it. Fame fades, but integrity sticks. We walked home through the quiet streets, our footsteps echoing softly. Every house we passed had a story, people who'd been fined, threatened, ignored. Now their voices had merged into something stronger. I realized this wasn't just our victory, it was theirs. When we reached our driveway, the mailbox still gleamed under the porch light, the same one that started it all. Dana reached out and brushed her fingers against the polished numbers. "I used to hate this thing," she said. "Now it's proof." "Proof of what?" I asked. "That even the smallest detail can become a symbol if you stand your ground." Inside, Tiffany was editing her video. Grant sat beside her, adding music, something hopeful, steady. I watched them for a while, the glow from the laptop painting soft light across their faces. They didn't look angry anymore. They looked proud, free. Later that night, when the house was quiet, I stepped onto the porch. The air carried the faint scent of rain and new beginnings. Across the street, a neighbor waved before heading inside. For the first time since moving here, I waved back without hesitation. I thought about everything that had happened. The slap, the fines, the lies, and how quickly control can crumble when people stop believing in it. Truth had done what anger never could. It healed the neighborhood. Dana joined me, leaning on the railing. "So," she said, "what now?" I looked out at the calm street, the rows of houses no longer identical, but somehow unified. "Now," I said, "we live here, for real this time." She smiled. "And maybe next week, we will finally plant that tree. Only if it's an unapproved species," I said, and she laughed. A sound that felt like sunlight breaking through months of clouds. The night settled around us, quiet and sure. No more envelopes, no more fear. Just a family, a community, and the long, peaceful echo of truth finally spoken aloud. Morning sunlight spilled across Oak Meadows like a promise finally kept. The air smelled of cut grass and fresh paint instead of tension. For the first time in months, the neighborhood didn't feel like a stage for someone else's power. It felt like home. At the community hall, the new HOA board gathered around a folding table covered in notebooks, muffins, and nervous laughter. No podiums, no speeches, just people sitting eye to eye. Maria, the retired teacher who had lived here the longest, cleared her throat. "First rule of the new board," she said. "Transparency isn't optional." Everyone nodded. It wasn't just a rule, it was therapy. They opened the windows, literally and figuratively. The first motion passed unanimously. All financial reports to be public, all meetings recorded and archived for residents. The second motion, Dana's idea, created a community forum online where homeowners could vote on proposals in real time. For the first time, Oak Meadows had a voice that couldn't be silenced with stationery and signatures. I watched from the back row, coffee in hand, trying not to grin. The place that once drained my patience now filled it. People actually argued, but the good kind of arguing, the kind that means everyone finally cares. Outside, Tiffany was helping paint a new sign for the entrance. "Welcome to Oak Meadows, where neighbors build together." She used the same neat block letters the HOA once fined us for. "You realize this font's still unapproved," I joked. She smirked. "Guess they'll have to find themselves." Grant was setting up benches near the playground, working with two kids who used to be too afraid to speak up. Watching him teach them how to level the boards, I saw something new in his posture, a quiet confidence that didn't need words. Dana walked up beside me, clipboard under one arm, her black notebook replaced by a bright green one labeled Rebuilding Plan. "Strange, isn't it?" she said. "Same streets, same houses, but it feels bigger somehow." "Because fear takes up space," I said. "Once it's gone, there's room to breathe." She smiled, eyes glinting. "Then let's keep it that way." That evening, the first true community picnic unfolded under strings of borrowed lights. Tables overflowed with potluck dishes, kids raced bikes down the cul-de-sac, and someone started a playlist that mixed old country with pop hits. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. Laughter echoed off the roofs where complaints used to live. Halfway through, Maria clinked her glass. "To the Bowmans," she said, "for reminding us that courage and paperwork make a pretty good team." Applause followed, warm, genuine, unpolished. I felt my face flush, not from pride, but from something gentler, belonging. Tiffany rolled her eyes. "Okay, Dad, you're officially HOA famous. Don't let it go to your head." I raised my lemonade. Fame fades. Good neighbors don't. As the night wound down, people lingered, no one rushing home like before. Lanterns swung lightly in the breeze. Dana leaned against me and whispered, "Think we're finally done fighting?" "Maybe," I said. "But if we ever have to again, at least we'll do it together." She nodded. That's the difference. Before, everyone was scared of losing. Now they're not afraid to stand. When the last song faded and the laughter thinned, we walked home down streets that finally looked alive. Lawns weren't identical anymore. Some wildflowers, some vegetable patches, some left as clean grass. Each yard told its own story, and somehow that made the whole place more beautiful. On our porch, Tiffany set the finished sign against the railing to dry. The paint shimmered under the porch light, still slightly wet, still becoming. Dana traced the letters with her finger. "You know," she said softly, "this might be the first thing in Oak Meadows that isn't about perfection." I smiled. Exactly. We stood there for a long moment, listening to the quiet hum of sprinklers and far-off laughter, the soundtrack of normal life returning. Behind us, our house glowed from the inside out. Warm, imperfect, whole. For the first time since moving here, Oak Meadows didn't need rebuilding anymore. It just needed living. A year passed, and Oak Meadows kept its promise. The lawns still glowed in the afternoon sun, but now they looked lived in instead of inspected. You could hear music from porches, smell weekend barbecues, see neighbors waving from mismatched chairs. It finally felt like a neighborhood, not a museum. Tiffany thrived. Her video about standing up for what's right became a local documentary project for her media class. Colleges started calling. She didn't brag. She just smiled, that quiet, knowing smile that said, "Told you honesty pays better than fear." Grant grew into his own kind of leader. He started mentoring younger students on the wrestling team and organizing Saturday repairs around the community, fences, gardens, mailboxes. The same kids who once whispered about the HOA family drama now looked at him with respect, not because he fought anyone, but because he never stopped showing up. As for Dana, she somehow turned her meticulous record-keeping into a consulting gig, helping other neighborhoods modernize their bylaws. "Turns out spreadsheets can save the world," she liked to say. She still carried her notebooks, but now they were full of color-coded ideas instead of evidence. And me? I finally exhaled. I built a small workshop in the garage again, not to fix problems, but to make things: birdhouses, benches, small pieces of peace. Every nail felt like punctuation at the end of a long, loud chapter. Sometimes, when the evening light hits the houses just right, I'd walk to the edge of the street, hands in my pockets, and think about everything that happened. All the letters, the meetings, the nights spent wondering if it was worth the fight. And every time, the answer felt simple. Your home is worth fighting for, I'd tell myself. Not the walls, the people inside them. That's what Oak Meadows had learned the hard way. Rules can build fences, but courage builds communities. One Saturday morning, while Dana planted flowers by the porch, the mail carrier dropped off a small package with no return address. Inside was a doormat, plain brown, new, freshly stitched. Across the top in bold letters it read, "Oh no, not you again." Dana burst out laughing. "Guess we've got a fan." I grinned. Or a reminder to stay humble. We set it at the front door. It wasn't perfect, and that was exactly right. Because perfection was never the goal, peace was. And for the first time in a long time, Oak Meadows finally had it.